So at this point, this is what my mosaic is looking like so far. So it's still a work in progress. I'm slowly adding in some more pieces and finishing up this turquoise area on the bottom here. And I have my pieces laid out in a little box here so I can kind of look through them and find the right pieces for the area that I need them for. So I'm slowly filling in this area here, so I'm just going through and finding pieces that have some areas that are flat to continue this kind of straight line right here, but also that have some shapes that will fill in all this negative space. The one thing you do want to keep in mind while you're gluing things down is that you want to be creating consistent spacing. So similar to this here, all of this should have fairly consistent spacing. We don't want any really large gaps or any large open areas that have the masonite underneath showing. But we do want to have consistent spacing in between everything. We don't want all the glass pieces so close together that they're touching. We want them to have about 1/8 of an inch to 1/16 of an inch in between all of this. So 1/16 is the smallest it can be, and 1/8 of an inch is the largest we want it to be. So if you look at this up close, looks like some of my pieces might be getting a little close right here, but we want to make sure that nothing is quite touching, but doesn't have really large gaps in it. And one way to make sure that that is happening and that your pieces aren't shifting around is to use just a small amount of glue. So you just want a tiny little dot of the glue on your pieces, and you want to stick that glue onto the piece, not put the glue on the masonite and then stick down the pieces. It is very tempting to just coat a lot of glue on an area that you're working on and then find pieces to just stick on there. But the problem with that is that it can cause there to be a lot of excess glue, and the pieces like to slide around on that glue. So we want to not use that much glue, and what helps is to just put a tiny little dot on the back side of the piece you're going to use and then stick it down where you want it to be. That way, when you stick things down, it's most likely not going to shift around. You do want to check on your pieces and make sure they haven't shifted around at all, but it's less likely to do so if you just put a little dot of glue on your actual glass, not the masonite. While you're working on continuing your piece, one thing to keep in mind is that you don't want to necessarily box in areas. So when I get to these windows here, I'm going to do them first, and then this outside area here. If I did the white that I'm going to add to this area, and then the windows, I would have a lot less kind of flexibility as far as what pieces can go in there, and it's a lot more of kind of shoving small pieces into a confined area, and that can be a little more difficult. So starting kind of inward and working outward with different areas is really helpful. And that lets you do any kind of adjustments or just small changes to your piece as you go. So for example, this whole design is based on my actual camper trailer, which is completely turquoise on the bottom and completely white on the top, including the door. So I was originally in my design going to somehow create an outline of a door here, but then I realized that wasn't very doable because I would need lots of small little pieces to outline that to continue the turquoise across in the door and the white in the top of the door as well. So what I've adjusted my design to be is I'm going to take the gray glass that I'm using for this area here and that I'm going to use for the wheel, and I'm going to include that all in this space here. And so what I want to do once I finish this turquoise is I'm going to be working on the door area in gray so that when I get up to here, it's not as boxed in and it won't be as difficult to find pieces that fit in this space. So I'm going to start working inward, starting in, working outward. So my next step after finishing up the turquoise is going to be the gray here, and then the windows in mirror, and then I can go in with the white here, and that'll make it a lot easier. So as you're working on that, make sure you're not boxing in lots of small tight areas that you then have to find the smallest of pieces to fit into. Working inward, working in, working outward works the best. And one last thing you want to keep in mind is when you're working on the edges, just like these are here, you want to make sure that no pieces are sticking off the edge of your masonite. So we want to be working right up against the edge, but we don't want to have any pieces, especially any kind of pointy edges, sticking up off of the edge of the masonite. So you want to find pieces when you are getting towards the edge areas that will fit roughly against the edge without it hanging off of the edge. So just right up against it. If there's a little bit of space between the glass and the edge of the masonite, that's okay, but we don't want to have big, large gaps on the edge either. So keep that in mind as you're finding the pieces that fit best in an area. You want anything that has mostly a flat edge to go along the edge of the masonite. So just like this green glass is here, it goes right up to the edge without going over the edge. We don't want any pieces or shards kind of sticking off the edge that could later cut someone if they're trying to handle the mosaic. So we want to keep it to the edges of the square.